All right, so here we are. We're going to do a video now, and this is my first attempt at doing some more sort of directly spiritual videos that are more meditative. And I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work out. With spiritual things, it's interesting. You can't ever say anything without then saying but. And pretty soon you have to have sort of announced all of the theological points of Christianity in order to not give people the wrong idea with the little piece you're sharing. And so it's tricky. So what I want to say with this whole series of more directly meditative videos is just remember apophaticism, okay? Remember that the foundational, one of the foundational principles in Christian mysticism is apophaticism. And that's this reality that God is beyond what we can feel. We can feel the presence of God, but God is beyond that. We can feel the presence of God, but what we're feeling isn't in any way the whole of God. Right? So our subjective experience that we notice and become aware of with God and with God's presence is not the truth. It's just the truth as we're receiving it in that moment to the best of our capacity. And so I'm going to make all kinds of statements that seem to contradict that in these videos. And there's just no way without just being really clumsy with speech and things becoming quite burdensome to avoid that. So I'll say, just notice how God feels in your feet. Notice how God feels in your knees. And just please keep in mind the apophatic dimension that no one is saying that's really how God is. We're just saying that that's the effect God is having in you. And so just some ideas about what that might mean as a foundation for this series of classes we're going to do. I mean, it might look like, so you have, let's say I did a meditative class on getting in touch with the personal dimension of God. So I say to everyone, take the time to invite God's presence to dwell inside of your body. And then I start to point out, notice how personal it is. See if you can notice the person that is in there. This isn't just a force. This is not something. It's someone. Well, it is entirely likely that someone would begin to feel a bit of dread in their heart from that language. And there could be tons of reasons why, but it's not really the goal of this video to point out all the reasons. It's more, what I'm saying is, someone might be afraid of that level of intimacy with God, and because of that fear, this noticing the personal dimension could make them feel dread. So did God bring dread into that soul? Or did the soul react somehow to God in a way that brought dread? Right? That's the distinction we need to make. And I don't really want to think of 15 scenarios right this moment, but there are probably 15 or 20 you could name where your experience with God would not actually be what God is, but more how your set of consciousness and states of being and ideas, your conglomeration of attributes, how it's affected by God's presence and how it reacts to God's presence. So what we're looking for here is sensitivity. What we're looking for is to begin to notice all the subtle things, that the subtle ways in which God affects us, and the effects that God has upon us. But what we're not trying to do is canonize them and say, this is what God showed me, or this is how God made me feel. We're not getting into making our subjective experience the truth. And this is really important. It can't be overstated how important it is. And from what the monk has told me, it's more important for people on the other side of the night than people before the night. Because people, before the night, people have experiences with God and they're sure that it is just God directly speaking to them. That's it. And then they go through the night and they go through some massive purifications and begin to discover that so much of what their experience with God was and the way they interpreted it was completely ego. And it was completely based in sin. And a deep purification happens. And then on the other side of that, a new freedom opens. And once again, God begins to reveal itself to the soul in a more illuminative way. But it is the sin of people in those higher stages to canonize their new experiences with God and say, well, I used to be so egoic and now I'm not. I used to would have interpreted this mystical experience this way, and now I'm interpreting it this way. And so there, and clearly the new way is true, whereas the old way would have been false. And what Christian mysticism tells us is that both ways are false. The old way is false, and the new way is false too. And so I have to give all these warnings because it's really important to me that I am teaching Christian mysticism, not Clinton's mysticism. And so I'm going to do some unique kinds of meditations where we sit with God. It's something unique. I haven't seen a whole lot of that in Christianity. But the principles must be in perfect alignment with Christian spirituality. I want what Jesus had. I want what the saints that Jesus raised up had. I want to transmit what the saints had to others. I want to be in alignment with Christian spirituality and Christian mysticism. And so this is just the caveat, and I'm not sure how I'm going to give a caveat before every video. I don't know how that's going to work. Probably from here forward, I will probably just say something along the lines of, with all due respect to the apophaticism of Christianity, knowing that whatever we experience is not fact or truth, let's move forward with this kind of sensitivity and awareness to God's presence, more subtle awareness of God's presence. I think that's the way we'll do it. And as long as we keep that apophatic dimension in the forefront of our minds and hearts, and as long as we don't canonize our experiences that we have with God in this class or really ever, as long as the new messages that come from God aren't put in the book of canon because, they're better than the old messages, as long as we keep that apophatic dimension going, we're sure to travel further along into union. But the soul that is on the other side of the night is filled with many sins. And their interpretation of God's presence and God's messages to them are still very weak and much still based in self to a large extent. And so that same sort of just carefulness. I could just give one example. It's not from anyone's life that I know, but just within the Catholic Church, there were, obviously everyone is so devout, and then there were all these people becoming saints and, spending hours in prayer and reading the scriptures and, building their whole lives around the teachings of Christ. And, one of the things that began happening in Christian history is, people started having a lot of visions about Jesus. And, a vision from Jesus that brings a personal message that is useful is okay. No one says that's wrong. It's kind of, it's not public revelation, right? You're not trying to change Christianity with it. It's subject to being false, and it's subject to being misinterpreted, and it's subject to all kinds of errors. But we don't deny that those things happen. They've happened to people we know. But what started happening is that people started having visions, giving, details about Jesus's life, parts that were not accounted for in the Bible. When he was 10, this was happening. When he was 17, this was happening. Or just Jesus appearing in a certain form. So now we know what Jesus looks like, right? I mean, it was a pure vision. It was a vision. It was clear as day. It was more real than us sitting here watching this video. But what they found out over time is that as more and more of these sort of private experiences rolled in, they were contradictory to one another. And so people figured out over time that this is subjective experience. It's mystical experience. It can impart transformation, but you can't canonize the experience you've had and say this is truth. You can say, I got something from it. It can benefit you in some way. That is true. You can think about it for yourself and see if it's a fit for you. You can do those kinds of things. But to start saying it's truth is to begin making another set of dogmas based on our own subjective experience that is limiting. So that's just an example from history, and there's so many more. So we have this God that has revealed itself completely and fully in the Gospels, right? The New Testament is Jesus Christ's word to us, right? It's the Trinity's word to humanity. It tells us our destiny. It tells us our purpose, why we were created, for what our vocation, what is the job of being a human, what is that in the grand cosmic scheme of things. We've been given so much, and nothing is missing if the goal is union with God. If the goal is union with God, if the goal is salvation, if the goal is to be transformed into a child of God, if the goal is to have all of our sin healed and removed from us so that we can be blameless before Christ, if the goal is purity, if the goal is what Jesus said the goal ought to be, then the New Testament is missing nothing. And so there aren't holes in the New Testament. We didn't lose those years when Jesus was growing up. They didn't include any of that information because it wasn't relevant to salvation. Right? We didn't, what, exact month was he born in, or, what day and time was he born? We don't need to know that. What color was his hair? Was he a humorous type or was he a serious type? None of that is relevant. None of that matters in any way. What matters is what has been revealed to us. And that's the point of the revelation, to give us what is needed for coming into union with God. So continually looking for revelation, continually looking for more information, and even asking for direct guidance in our lives, specific answers to specific problems. All of that it happens. I mean, no one says that never happens, but it isn't the point and it isn't the goal. And when it becomes the goal, it starts becoming a sidetrack and really quickly leads into heresy. It really quickly leads into things that sound really good, but end up occupying time and consciousness and thought that is needed in the more spiritual, direct way that Jesus taught to come into salvation and union. So it becomes a sidetrack. It becomes something that detracts from our spirituality instead of gives to it. Okay, so just having said all of that, I want to start doing some, just sitting as a group. This might even become maybe a Wednesday night class or a Monday night class. Maybe it could become that regular, where we're taking the time to sit together and in and with the body of Christ and with the Holy Trinity, knowing that we're not canonizing our experience, and knowing that there are many, many factors in an experience. Even when you have an experience with God, there are many factors that feed into that are based in self. If someone brand new on the path gets struck by blinding white light and is brought into that kind of majesty and power, their reaction and interpretation of that event is so different from someone in fourth or fifth stage prayer that they're not even comparable. You could have the identical experience, and the person in stage one will come out with less and more. Less of what God really intended and more of what God did not intend. But the person in 4 or 5 isn't a saint either, and so there's still some element of that going on with them. So just having said all of that, I think we could maybe begin this new kind of of class. And so why don't you guys we can just try this tonight. Why don't you, first of all, just sit and get really comfortable. And just take your time. You might not have known this was going to be that kind of video. I'll come up with a name for them and name them so when you see the video, you know what's coming. And why don't you just take the time to sit down and get comfortable. And you want to be able to hear this video, but I don't think you need to be watching it. I think that's unnecessary at this point. Really what you want is quality sound and a comfortable position to be in. Just, take your time and get adjusted and the pillow under your knees or whatever it is you're doing with that. And just in a restful position, why don't you take a few deep breaths and just try to let go of your daily concerns and thoughts and worries. And see if you can just bring all of your attention and your awareness to your body. You could just notice that you have a body, right? That there's information being shared with your brain through your nervous system about your body. You notice that if you just put your attention on your feet, you notice that you can feel them, that they are there. There's a quality of sensation in your feet. And it is probably different on the top of your foot than it is on the bottom of your foot. And you may notice there is a difference in sensation in the pad and toes of your feet than there is in the heels. Notice that you can place all of your attention on the front pad and toes of your feet, and that the sensations there become more prominent to you because your attention is on them. And then notice that you could listen to your whole foot, both of your feet, all at once. The top of your foot, the heels, the front pads and toes, your arch, and that becomes a sort of a 3D sensory experience, and that you can even feel inside of your foot. That there's somewhat of a sense of sensation in your feet. And you can just notice that you have feet. And you might now do something similar with your ankle. Maybe all the way up to your knee. That you can feel different sensations in your shins. And in your calf muscles. And you notice that with your eyes closed, you can even sort of see your feet and your shins and your calves. Take a moment and just notice your bones. And you can do something similar and notice that you have thighs. And that there is a quality of sensation in your thighs all the way up into your hips. And you can do that with your entire torso. You can notice how it feels in your lower belly. You can notice just the various sensations that you feel if you pay attention to your torso. You may or may not associate those sensations with specific body parts or organs. but you can notice that it does feel different in your chest. Than it does in your lower belly. And you can notice your arms and hands, that they too exist and are sending information to your brain via your nervous system. You can notice how it feels in your hands. Your forearms. And your shoulders. You can notice the sensations that you feel in your head. In your face. In your jaw. You can notice that you can feel your ears. How it feels in the top of your head. This is a little like establishing a baseline. Just how is it in general to inhabit this body? What is it like today for me to be in my body? See if you can notice all of your body at once, from the top of your head all the way down to your feet, and everything in between. That you can rest your attention on all of your body at once. Or your attention can be drawn to certain places in your body. That seem to stand out to you. So here is the temple of God. Here is where Christ lives in you. All the way down into your feet. Here is the Holy Trinity dwelling inside of you. Here is the Holy Trinity living in your heart. Here lives the Holy Trinity inside of you. Here is the God who knows you, and who loves you. who has promised to make your soul its dwelling place. And here it is, living in you. And here you are, living with it. And here is your place of prayer. Your secret place. Your inner room, where you meet God alone. In your arms and hands and head and face, feet and knees and legs and hips, and your chest and your stomach.